Welcome everybody to another episode of DNS Unfiltered. Today I'm joined by Dustin Bolander. Dustin is the CIO of Clear Guidance Partners, a MSP focusing on lawyers, which is crazy, and also the founder of a cyber insurance company called Beltex. Dustin, welcome to the show.
Thanks. I'm excited.
So Dustin gave me permission to drop a hard question on him in the beginning. And the question is, why do MSPs hate lawyers?
With good reason. So I tell everybody I don't know that I would say that the good lawyers are the best clients, but they generally pay on time. They don't want to talk to you, which I think is a good thing, right? Get it fixed, get off the phone. The QBR.
Less billable hours.
Yeah, exactly. So they're very efficient. Let's say that, very efficient with our time as an MSP. But the other part where do MSPs hate it is the software is pretty bad. One of the only industries that I've seen that's worse on software is the insurance industry, which I'm sure we'll get to at some point. But a lot of bad software. And then the bad law firms are the worst clients, hands down. I mean, we have a pretty strict no screaming, no yelling rule. And we have a lot of prospects that just self-select off of that, where they're just like, "What do you mean I can't yell?" I'm like, "Yeah,
that's
sorry.
One strike. Strike
yeah,
one."
Exactly. So the bad law firms where they really throw their weight around, they threaten to sue, they refuse to pay, that kind of stuff. I've gotten really good at screening those over the years. So luckily, knock on wood, we've avoided that for the most part. But those are the guys that the MSPs really hate, and rightfully so. Like, those are hands down the worst. My old MSP, we had CPAs, construction, this, that, and the other, and we had some really bad law firms. So I've seen it, experienced it firsthand. I get why most people don't want to work with law firms.
So you kind of brought it up, I guess, like as a follow-up question. Do MSPs steer away from insurance as well?
I've seen a handful of MSPs that go towards it. The problem on insurance as a client base, the software is awful for the most part. Everything is either super out of date or is just outrageously expensive to where very few insurance companies are buying it. It's highly regulated, which always makes it a little bit more complicated. But that's where everybody's like, "Ooh, it's highly regulated. I can bring expertise. I can charge more." The other part of a lot of people don't realize is, unless you're a carrier, insurance is not super profitable. So it's not. People are like, "Oh my gosh, it's printing money." You got to have a pretty big book to print money. Whenever you go into that typical, 20-person insurance agency, they're probably making less than your average MSP. I mean, if you look at your usual commission on insurance is going to be 10 to 15%. And then you got to pay for all your systems. You got to pay for your people. Salaries in insurance are kind of high. So they're usually paying their people more than MSPs. So I personally, for MSPs, I don't think it's a good industry to go into.
And with that being said, you did something that I don't see many MSPs doing. I don't know, maybe if there's others, but you really jumped in like head first with lawyers, law firms, and insurance. Like, why did you do that?
I don't know. It's going to take years of therapy to figure that out. So the insurance part of it actually ended up being, I had a couple years ago, I had a big cybersecurity vendor hire me to do due diligence on an insurance company. Kind of ended up getting more and more into that. On the MSP side, we started using insurance to sell, and then from that, we ended up setting up Beltex, which is my other company right now. We have our own proprietary cyber policy. So it's a cyber policy. We have a big carrier partner that is backing it. It's on, their paperwork. That it's not Dustin's bank account that's covering the claims and stuff. But and then whenever the parent company recently sold, as part of that transaction, that me and my business partner were just like, "Ooh, we'll take Beltex." The new owners just wanted to sell other people's stuff. It was a distribution play. So that's how I kind of ended up. I don't want to say accidentally owning an insurance company, but basically.
Well, let's talk about accidentally for a minute. I think I've heard you say something along the lines of MSP owners are pretty smart and crafty, and with enough time and Googling and possibly AI now, they could figure most things out. So I assume this is what you did when you went into the insurance business.
Yep.
You're that crafty, intelligent individual. You saw a need. But where do you think MSPs should really direct that skill set? Kind of like you did for insurance. Maybe it is
Yeah.
insurance, maybe it's something else.
Yeah, so with all the acquisitions going on, right, we're seeing that it's buy, and there's all these big super giant nationwide MSPs, things like that. Um, I think it's going to become, you're going to see the industry kind of split into three buckets. And I am answering your question. I'm just taking the long way to get there.
Yeah,
Sorry.
do.
But you have the big, huge MSPs, so grow to a certain size, sell to the big guys. They're going to service everybody and anybody. You're still going to see a ton of the one-man bands, the mom and pop shops that are maybe three, four employees at the most. Those guys will always be around. If you go look at any other industry, you have lawyers, accountants, things like that. There's certain times where it's like, man, I want to talk to the owner, I want to work with the owner. So those guys will not go away. So what does that leave us though? Is we look at these MSPs that are say 5 to 100 employees. What is the use case, I guess is a good phrase for it, for those size. Those guys are not going to be able to be generalists going forward. So I think for that niche to be able to have sustained success as a business, you're going to have a specialty, right? An expertise. We do really good QBRs. We do good customer service. We have automation. Like that's not going to be a niche. We do automation for HR, and we can fully automate your onboarding and offboarding of your employees because you're in construction and it's high turnover. Like, okay, that's a cool niche, right?
Yeah.
In our case, a couple of years ago, we bought a company that does back office services for lawyers. So whenever I go in, that's still only about 10, 15% of our business. But whenever we go in and we talk to these law firms and say, we can do your technology, and they're like, great, so and so big national company, can also, as I say, yeah, but we have actual, accounting, HR specialists, ex-firm admins that are sitting down the hallway from my help desk, and we're able to talk to them and ask them questions. And so I think that kind of thing, you're going to see a lot more specialization. Verticals, obviously, is the most common use case for that. But then on the other side of it too is the automation piece I mentioned earlier, just general automation, no, but we know how to automate this really special part of the business, right? Things like that. There's one guy that has an MSP that I like a lot that he does. They know how to do the software side of it, so they sell to a lot of companies that have software development teams because they can assist with that as well. Like that,
Oh,
that's the kind of niche you're going to have going forward to be that mid-size MSP.
yeah, that's interesting because that is like us at DNS Filter. We've seen that firsthand. Like, it's not all MSPs are suited to support a software development business.
Yeah,
But let me get these buckets. So you're talking about the kind of one man or few person band that's going to be generalist. You're
yeah,
talking to the owner. That's bucket one. Bucket two is these mid-sized MSPs that need to specialize, and the third is just large conglomerate MSPs.
yeah. Your big ones where you have the economies of scale to be able to go in at $150 a seat. You have really good contracts. You have really good lawyers, that kind of thing, and you can you know very very good sales team, that kind of thing. It's I don't know anything about bigger businesses like that, but generally that just seems to be there's a formula that they can follow, and it's you got enough time and enough money that those seem to be successful.
Yeah, so you've got your friendly neighborhood MSP. You've got your specialists; they specialize really
Mhm.
highly in one thing, and then you've got your specialists in a large mega
Yeah.
corporation of things.
Yep.
So let's focus on that middle bucket because that's probably where most MSPs will fall or are right
I think
now.
that's where most of them want to go these days. Yeah.
What do you think those that finding that niche? Like, how do you do it, and do you have any suggestions?
So the biggest one is either be really willing to learn. So one of the things with me is I always joke that I didn't go to law school, but I have an internet JD. Like I love reading contracts and
Yeah,
stuff, which is how
same.
I ended up on the insurance business because insurance is just like a ton of contracts and stuff like that. I like reading that stuff, breaking it down. So that was kind of a natural, naturally attracted me. I know some guys that are like the manufacturing. I got a friend of mine up in Connecticut that used to be a machinist and he has an MSP now. So he absolutely loves, he has a shipyard in Florida that he does. It's random. He's one guy, but they were just like, oh yeah, they had a bunch of weird challenges on that kind of stuff that he can speak about. So it's like, what are you good at? And then like, where's your passion? And I don't mean what are
Yeah.
you good at? Like, I'm really good at computers. That's not going to work for that specialization MSP. but oh, I absolutely love doing this. My parents did this, so I know a bunch about it. I can speak about it. My best friend does this, that sort of thing. The lawyer thing, my wife actually worked at a law firm. My best friend is a lawyer. Half my friends went to law school. So the lawyers was not something I loved. That was just a natural, I could speak the language. I knew enough about it to kind of come in as that authority figure initially. And as we started realizing that we were closing a bunch of law firms, it was like, all right, let's dig in here. So I
Yeah.
think that's a good one is like what are you good at? What do you love? If you're lucky enough that you can do both of those together, great. But don't. A lot of guys will follow the trend. Healthcare is my favorite example on that, where they're just like, we're going to be a healthcare MSP. Like, no, you got to have a plan. You got to have something. What makes you a healthcare MSP besides
Were
we're
you
going
a
to?
doctor in a previous life?
Yeah, exactly. They just pick it because like, oh, that's a big. I can go sell HIPAA training into these guys. Like, that's not a plan. That's not a strategy. Just on the specialization piece is going more than surface level. You see a ton of guys that are out there, oh, we do great QBRs, we do automation, that kind of thing. It's having something, not just speaking their language, but having something that go look at. Whenever I'm talking to folks and they're like, oh yeah, we're unique, like when I'm struggling, is go look up who are your 10 competitors, go look at what they're saying. Are you actually saying anything different, right? Could you just switch those words around? You got to have an actual unique proposition that can be delivered on, that somebody else can't say. Like in my case, bragging, sorry, is my competitors can't sit there and say, oh yeah, we can do your HR and accounting work as well. Like, because they literally can't, right? I have great customer service. The other guy can say that, and you can't really prove or disprove on it. So that's
Right.
where I think for the mid-sized MSPs, you're going to have to see a little bit more, or a lot bit more actually, specialization as time goes on, because otherwise you're getting hit from both sides of the one man band, the mom and pop shop is going to be able to. I have 23 employees on the MSP business. I can't sit there and interact, and I have the insurance business also, but I can't sit there and interact with all the customers. They're always going to beat you on that interaction side. And then the bigger companies are going to be, on the technical stuff. They probably have 3 exchange experts on staff. They have. I was talking to somebody earlier today that there's a really large MSP has a team dedicated on email deliverability only, like, which was crazy to me. It hadn't occurred to me, but they have a multi-person team that just deals with email deliverability issues, SPF, DMARC, and all that fun stuff. Can't compete with that as
Yeah.
a
That
midsize, right?
that makes sense. And what's cool though is you're talking about like kind of a dream scenario where the MSP like may be forced to specialize
Yeah,
in the near future, and that will certainly differentiate your MSP from others. And when you're looking for what to specialize in, start with the things that you enjoy, perhaps hobbies, like maybe you love woodworking in your garage or
yeah,
tinkering with, remote control cars or whatever it is. Look for companies that do that would need your
right.
services. Then you can kind of live the best. Like I didn't get to be, uh, you know, a a tiny motor engineer or whatever it is,
Yeah,
but maybe I can do it, vicariously through my customer.
yeah, exactly. That was something else that recently had come up too. Was somebody was saying, okay, I looked at my largest customers, and I'm going to go be healthcare or whatever. I can't remember, but it's like, no, look at who are your favorite customers? Which ones are you excited to go work with, to sit in on the meetings, that kind of stuff? Because your largest ones might not. Again, if you're really lucky, it's the same customers, but which ones do you legitimate enjoy? Are you going to be passionate about? Versus oh, your largest customer is a funeral home. Like there's there's probably somebody out there that's passionate about IT for funeral homes, but that kind of thing where it's like, don't just go after what you think is the biggest, but something. The more passionate you are about a business, you don't need to be the Excel sheet driven CEO kind of thing. Small business as a like founder, your passion is your big thing, that nobody else is going to be able to match that passion. So leverage that. What are your favorite clients? What's your favorite industry? Ooh, we got I love Excel. Yeah, we have 2 CPAs. Let's go after CPAs, kind of thing. Like, that's a better way to do it than looking at just the raw numbers.
Yeah, good point. Let's pivot just a touch and talk about obtaining cyber insurance like as an MSP. My understanding is that at Beltex there's like a kind of an onboarding approval process. Is that right?
Yeah, so
To
there's
get qualified for the the incident response?
Yeah, so we have on our own policy, one of the things that I started really focusing on this last year was if you go out and you look, there's a bunch of insurance companies, agencies functionally that are in the MSP channel. Not saying they're doing a bad job or anything, but if you go to these different guys, that it's the same 10 policies that they're getting everybody, right? They're going to give them a coalition, a cowbell, an at bay, this, that, and the other. So it's just kind of pick who do you like the most, who has the best memes, that sort of thing. So my thing was like, okay, what can we bring that's unique to the industry? So with our policy is I realized it's really rare that you get to do like a win-win-win, but in this case, I think we did because let's say we're going through a claim, right? As in my MSP, one of our clients gets breached, insurance comes in. It's a ransomware attack, so we have to restore from backup. At that point, the traditional insurance thing has been we're going to bring in this elite incident response team. We're going to pay them $350 an hour or more to restore from backups. I'm like, guys, we got a great MSP sitting right here that manages those backups, that knows how to restore stuff lightning fast, and is going to charge you a lot less than $350 an hour. So that was our pitch to our carrier partner, and they absolutely loved it. So now, in that situation with a Beltex policy, the MSP, it's a quick approval process. It's basically making sure you're, professional. You don't have to pay for a certification, anything like that. But at that point, if that MSP is qualified and pre-approved for the incident response assistance, then during the claim, the attorneys will say, okay, Mr. MSP, Mikey, I need you guys to go in and do this restore of these services. So we're bringing the MSP in side by side with the other providers for an incident to help. It gets everybody back up quicker, saves the insurance company money, gets the client recovered, and also reduces their claims costs, and the MSP gets paid.
Yeah, it's really a brilliant strategy because, like you said, the MSP is already familiar with everything for that specific business.
They're sitting right
I think
there.
I think the problem is that the MSP is now like tarnished in a way in the eyes of maybe the customer, perhaps the insurance company, like they have failed in some sort of way. And it's not a question of like when you're if a cyber breach happens, it's kind of when.
Right.
And there are mitigations
Yeah.
and risk risk mitigation, but in reality, the attacks are coming so furiously that it would be nearly impossible to never experience some type of breach event or at least an attack.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, right now we have an open claim. I'm 99% sure that it ended up being there's a big FortiGate 0 day out right now. 99% sure that's what happened. Somebody in the comments gonna say, "LOL, shouldn't have used FortiGate," but happens to all the firewall vendors. But whenever that happens, the other defenses worked. So it's something that there wasn't even any substantial downtime. This is like I think the policyholder is like a 70-person company. So the breaches happen, but everybody was prepared. The MSP did a great job on it. So you still had a good outcome. It is an insurance claim, but that's the whole reason you have it there, right? The forensics team came in, the lawyers came in, all that good stuff. They'll put a bow on it and say, okay, you're clean, you're good to go, that kind of thing. But from that standpoint, there's going to be certain cases where it's, the MSP hired some guy drunk off the street and he opened remote desktop to the internet. Like, yeah, those guys probably shouldn't be doing security. But in a lot of cases, like you said, it's a question of when, not if. Stuff comes up, we reduce the blast radius, that kind of thing. I don't think the MSP should be tarnished. And that was part of the reason that, I started pushing so hard on this is a lot of these cases, I'm not even going to try to make up a number on it, but a substantial amount of them where it's like, this is just the unfortunate reality of it these days. The MSP did a good job. They, aren't going to stop 100% of the attacks. Nobody is. And that drives me nuts on a lot of these insurance companies now that are providing security services. It's, guys, you can't sit there and say MSPs don't do a great job, then you're selling the same MDR services that the MSPs are using. Like it's a little bit predatory. So I wanted to find something that worked for kind of win-win for all parties involved, which is where we ended up pitching.
Yeah, I think you've definitely found that sweet spot. So kudos to you. I think that's kind of a new strategy that other insurance companies hopefully will adopt.
Yeah, there's right now, I can tell you it's us and TechRug is one of our competitors, but they have a pretty similar program set up like that as well. Unfortunately, the one thing you just said you think or hope other insurance companies will adopt. Unfortunately, what we seem to be seeing is that most of them are trying to build security services, or insurance
to
companies are
compete.
buying MSSPs. So that's going to be an interesting battle this year.
Yeah, I have a family member that works at an insurance company, and she asked me questions like this a lot. And last year, the software they used got ransomware. So they couldn't now not log into their probably terrible business software that they use. You already mentioned that twice. Like most of them are terrible. That software got breached, ransomware. They were probably down for about 3 weeks where they couldn't work because they
Oh
couldn't
wow.
log in because their
Yeah.
system was out of service. And I was asking her, like, so when you're providing cyber insurance to someone, do you like how do you factor that in that you guys lost,
Yeah.
lost the game? And basically, she's like, well, we really don't.
Yeah.
It's like, because we're pricing things on risk and our risk footprint, whatever. Like we can't factor that in. I'm like, yeah, but it happened to you, so you have
Right.
to assume that it's going to happen to them.
Yep. Yeah.
Basically, I was pleading with her to be a bit more kind.
Yeah. No, and that's it's a weird, the strangest dynamic to me was that if you go and you look that a insurance carrier, their customer is not necessarily the policyholder. In a lot of cases, their customer ends up being the insurance agent. So what you're
Yeah,
seeing
selling
is,
through them.
yeah, because and so they have to balance on. So my biggest gripe is on our policy, we mandate 24/7 managed detection and response. It's proven statistically, like nobody pushes back. It is a great defense. So I'm like, why isn't insurance requiring it? I kind of screamed that from the roofs for 2 years, and what I've learned, the answer is because that makes it more difficult to sell insurance. Now,
Mm.
again, you go down the street to the, mom and pop restaurant that wants a cyber policy. Okay, well, you need MDR. Well, Mikey, what's MDR? Like, how do I get this MDR? That kind of thing. So there's a balance on it. What seems like common sense to people in security like you and I, on the insurance side, like they have to walk a fine line of not making it too difficult to get because the small business doesn't understand what's being asked, and then the agent doesn't understand what's being asked. So while you could
Yeah,
have a lot better controls, realistically, nobody would be able to buy insurance because nobody would know what was being asked or how to explain it.
yeah, or they just start doing MSP like services
Yeah.
themselves,
Yep.
which is
Which you're seeing
definitely a.
also. Yeah.
So you were, let's say a customer comes to you and they have an MSP, and you need to kind of vet this MSP. How do you go through that step to qualify them as being capable of managing your customers and
Yeah.
your insurance policy
We're
through
looking
your
for a couple
customer?
different pieces. So the first one is we're insurance. So whatever you want to say that, as insurance is, insurance does kind of thing. We want to see that they have a good insurance policy for the MSP. That gives us a great baseline to say, it's sort of that in the same sense, do you have multi-factor turned on? If somebody's like, no, I don't use multi-factor, right away, you're just like, oh my gosh, these guys are a dumpster fire, right?
That's like step one. Well, like step 1.5.
Yeah,
It's like password manager, MFA,
yeah,
like bare minimum.
yep. So from that standpoint, if an MSP doesn't have insurance, then okay, huge red flag, like we don't even want to talk to you. And then
Mhm.
past that, we're looking for some technical staff, some basic security controls. But then one of the big ones that we need for them to be a partner is that during a claim, during any kind of incident really, is having a decision maker available. So you'll see these MSPs to where it's the owner and then 14 staff with no decision making ability. Like we can't be working with those guys because we got to have somebody that's on deck. I need to go look at the form. I believe we actually require that somebody's available 24/7 during the claim. That at 2 a.m., if the forensics people are doing something, they need to talk to somebody at the MSP to make a decision that they have a direct line to a person to be able to call them.
Mhm.
So that was one of the pieces as we put this together. And this was probably about 18 months of work. It was nothing in insurance moves quickly, but that was actually one of the biggest pieces. So we, sat down, worked with several of the incident response firms that insurance uses. I went to all sorts of fun insurance conferences, stuff like that. But that was one of the biggest pieces was just some of the MSPs. Whenever a claim is, they're trying to be involved, but then it's a tier one help desk person who has no authority, and also honestly shouldn't even be involved in the first place at that level. So we want to make sure that there's a good senior resource available that has the ability to sign off on changes. So that's one of the big pieces. We actually see a lot of MSPs that are just like, oh, well, the owner, Eric, can do that. We're like, all right, great. Who else besides Eric, though? We need somebody. You got to have some
Right.
designated contacts for, again, when, not if this happens.
Yeah. Plus, you would need, someone who can make decisions and someone who with the technical
Yeah.
capability to access certain systems.
Right.
And that's not always the same person.
Yep.
Hopefully not the same
Yeah. Hopefully
person.
not. So yeah, we're looking for some stuff like that. And then the other part is they do need to be on for so we do have to have that relationship between the MSP and the customer still, right? They do have to be under an active managed services contract. We're not going to let the MSP participate if it's an hourly agreement where the MSP hasn't even touched the
Mm-hmm.
company in 4 months. That doesn't help anybody. So we do require an active monthly managed services agreement to be in place for that MSP to assist.
That's actually really good, though. I mean, you're kind of encouraging best practices for the
Yeah,
MSP through other
and that was
customers.
my thing.
Do
Was
you
like,
guys have to?
if we get,
Go ahead.
1% of the market, I'll be perfectly happy with that. This isn't a mass market play. We're not trying to, solve the problem for everybody. We want to work with just those security conscious MSPs and then the kind of more security mature small businesses.
Do you guys have to get into like the tooling recommendation space through your insurance company?
Little bit. I didn't want to. One of the biggest complaints that I see is like, let's go back. We talked MDR, right? To where, okay, you go down the
Mm-hmm.
drop down and you're like, oh, it's Alien Vault and CrowdStrike and, Cylance. And you're like, I'm an MSP.
It's
Like,
like a pick list.
yeah, where's the Blackpoint, the Lumens, the Huntresses? So we're vendor neutral for the most part. There's a couple of them to where it's like, oh, that's not really an MDR. We can't accept that. I'm not going to publicly go into the blacklist of those, but no, for the most part, it's pretty open ended because we did not want to be sitting there dictating the technologies in use. And I get on some of these with the insurance, if they're wanting to go, we're going to sell $200 million of policies, like you got to be a little bit more curated on that side. Our
Yeah.
argument and what has been borne out so far in our statistics has been that, we're going to set a much higher baseline than anybody else. So that will naturally, going in, seeing that you need to have email encryption, you have to have 24/7 MDR, so on and so forth, right? You're not going to see very many folks that come in with half-baked solutions, half-implemented solutions. Just to be able to check all those boxes to even qualify that they're generally, not everybody, but most of them, it's like, all right, these guys are pretty solid.
Yeah. So I'm sure your MSP background and your tech background kind of help a significant amount for you to kind of vet the tools that you see that are in play that people you're trying to
Yeah,
insure.
and my business partners, professional CTO, CISO, on the cybersecurity side of software side of things. So I'd like to brag on that. That we're the only insurance group in the channel that's actual practitioners that's not coming from the insurance world. So yeah, I feel like we have a pretty good grip on it.
I've heard you talk about standalone cyber insurance policies, and it seemed like
Oh,
you
the
had a very
warranties.
yes, standalone cyber warranties. Can you tell me, like, first of all, start with the difference because this was kind of a new term for me.
Yeah, so this is the spicy part of our interview. So the warranties, you got two different kinds. That there's the embedded, which is something like Sentinel-1 is my favorite example because you can go look it up. It's fully transparent online. By using Sentinel-1, you get access to this warranty. It'll pay out like $1,000 per endpoint if there is a breach and you had it configured
I see.
correctly. It's a cherry on top. Maybe it helps cover part of your insurance deductible, things like that. The other one, though, is the standalone warranties. So this is a type of insurance. It's interesting because a lot of times they're marketing that they talk about how they have reinsurance behind it. It's not insurance, but it does have reinsurance. Like, guys, come on, it's your call a spade a spade. But it's a sort of a micro policy in a lot of cases. Um, Typically lighter underwriting, but also substantially less coverage. So there's one out there that you can get where it's like, oh, we provide instant payout. It's a $5,000 Visa gift card. So not nothing, but that's a big difference versus $1 million policy. Um, One of my favorite examples, this isn't one of our policies, but it's almost like kind of a competitor, but Coalition, you've probably heard of. They're huge. A
Mhm.
lot of their policy language is pay on behalf of. So it's not the warranty guys will talk like, oh, insurance, you're cutting these huge checks. On a Coalition policy, the majority, if not all of it during a claim, is paid by Coalition. And at the end of it, they're just like, hey, Mikey, your deductible is 10,000 bucks. Here you go. So real world, that's the whole cyber warranty thing of we pay out instantly. Like that's not actually something you see in most insurance claims to even be a problem. Um, so that's where my I don't know, whatever you want to call it, conflict, my distaste of it is like the reality versus what they're saying is not necessarily accurate. But then the benefits piece of it, I mentioned earlier, the coverages aren't as much, so you're seeing a lot more narrow of on business interruption. There's limits, there's smaller limits on certain things that are in the fine print. Insurance is too, but it's at least a little more standardized on that versus the cyber warranties. Anybody can kind of sit down, put some money behind it. It's less regulated. I think there's still a good use case for it. The example I always bring up is, say you're doing retail, you got a 5-person retail location, like that's probably a good one for a cyber warranty because they have 2 point of sale terminals, they have email on their phones. Like there's not a lot there to, have a full compromise from a standard policy. But as soon as you start going up to where, there's you're paying I think $5,000 for like a $500,000 warranty. Our average price on our Beltex policy is under $4,000 for a full $1 million in coverage. So there's just not a lot of good use cases for these warranties. And then putting my
Mhm.
MSP hat back on, I tell every MSP that wants to sell these, call up your insurance carrier, ask them what will happen if one of these warranties fails and your client comes after you because you sold it to them. You can't just sell
They're gonna
somebody and say,
say,
yeah, I'm hands off. And all the carriers that we've talked to have said you would need either financial services coverage or the one that made me laugh would be they say you need insurance agency coverage for us to be able to handle that. So it's just putting the MSP at risk for it's a cool marketing thing. But to me, that's pretty
Mhm.
much all it is. It's a cool marketing thing. Real world, it's not good for your customer. It's not good for you, the MSP. It's probably not going to pay out. As much as people make fun of insurance for not paying out, the warranties are 10 times worse. One of the big companies bragged about that their warranty had never been paid out. They were trying to talk about like how great their security was, but I was like, terrible,
Right. It's
terrible
like,
language.
sounds like you just have like a good legal team.
Yeah,
And actually, that the phrase reminds me of product warranties,
yeah,
which are notoriously difficult to actually collect on.
yep.
Like I've had relatively expensive tech gear that just dies, and it's like within the warranty. And then I try to get it replaced or refurbished somehow, and it is a huge pain. And it sounds like this cyber warranty style of insurance is very minimal and likely hard to collect on.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a good way to think of it is, as hard as those product warranties are to collect on. Um, my favorite thing is so there's a couple of situations where they've used for marketing and been like, car insurance and car warranty, are two different things. Like, have you ever talked to anybody that's tried to collect on one of those aftermarket car warranties? Like, that's a guys that you probably shouldn't be marketing that way because that's a bad example. Like you're making the association, but it's kind of accurate in those cases. So they have their place, but it's again extremely minimal.
Yeah. Do you think there's like a tipping point where MSP needs to start looking for cyber insurance to cover themselves? Or is it just like
As soon as you have enough of a
baseline?
business that you couldn't go and shut it down and start a new one, if that makes sense, right? So stuff's gonna happen. Even if it wasn't your fault, you're gonna have a client get ticked off. God forbid you have one of those huge, like the Buffalo jump where the RMM vendor got hit back in I think it's 2018. Things like that's really bad. But if you're say you're a one person shop that's just kind of taking, contract jobs, if you had something happen, you could probably shut down the business and just go start a new LLC tomorrow. Like, okay, I could see the argument there. But if you got 2 or 3 people, and the other thing is, a lot of people don't realize that insurance isn't that expensive. So, like, I'll tell you on IMSP, we just finished renewal for it. We're a little bit over 4 million a year in revenue. We got a really solid policy for about $9,000 for $2 million in coverage. And granted, I'm have a little bit of an insider knowledge on it, right? So I probably did a better job on it than your average MSP would get. But there are the if you're overpaying where you're just like, God, this is outrageous. We had another MSP, not mine, that we helped recently. They were paying $28,000 a year, and so it ended up the carrier they were with is really good, reputable, but they have an in-house SOC, right? They have in-house security people. That carrier hates that risk. We switched to another carrier and it went down to like $8,000. So you can get
Wow.
good coverage at a reasonable price. You just got to play the game a little bit. It's like one of those things. If every year I'm sitting there going, Mikey, here's your renewal, here's your renewal, you're probably not getting the best price or the best coverage that you could. So
Yeah. Oh, and it gets slightly higher every
yeah,
year.
and it's gonna keep going up. But to the your point about when should you get it? Like it's not as expensive as kind of the floor that I say is $2,000 a year. You're looking at if you're an MSP that's like $500,000. We've done this for several of them, so this is speaking from actual data. About $2,000 a year will get you a solid MSP policy that's going to cover your cyber and then also your services delivered, right? Your backups fail for one of your clients and they come after you, that would be covered under that policy also.
So you mentioned in there that large insurance company didn't like that specific client because they had an in-house SOC. Why is that?
That is one of the highest risk things you can do from insurance's eyes because, oh, you're going to miss a security, you're going to miss an intrusion. It turns into a bigger attack, things like that.
Hmm.
That's one of the most,
It's like there's a paper trail that
yeah,
you neglected
yep.
something.
You are the full stop, right? Like on my MSP, we use Huntress, so it's like, oh, we got Huntress, we're great. But whenever you have the SOC yourself, it's like it's you. The buck stops here, right? So that adds a lot of from the underwriter standpoint, that adds a ton of liability.
Let's put your legal hat back on. Not that you're a lawyer. You're not a
My
lawyer, right?
internet JD.
Yeah, internet lawyer. Love it.
Yep.
Um, the MSP is going, typically dealing with a lot of contracts, monthly recurring revenue. Do you have any tips on, because you've been on both sides of this coin,
No.
like dealing with a lot of lawyers, an MSP yourself, and even, on the insurance side, you have a lot of knowledge. What are some of the best ways to structure a contract to where you're not as liable, like you're not as on the hook or protected
Yeah.
in the best way? Do you have any suggestions on
Yeah.
that?
So limitation of liability is obviously a huge one, right? Wanting to restrict how much, even if something does go south, how much you can, be damaged for. That's one of the biggest pieces. One other one that's come up frequently, relatively speaking, you don't see as many claims on this stuff as you would, kind of everybody talks about. But when they do happen, from like a neglect standpoint, there is so Eric Tildes is a attorney that does a lot of MSP work. He has an awesome presentation. I'm going to shamelessly steal from him. As he said, belts and suspenders and suspenders. So he's talking about like be explicit on what you do, then be explicit on what you don't do, then be a little bit more explicit on top of that. That there's stuff where it's like, oh, I thought Mikey, I thought you guys were doing that for us, right? Where it's like, nope, we
Mm-hmm.
don't. We provide these tools that your team has to, use them. Is a good example. That's language that I see in contracts. That's a good thing. We're going to provide this multi-factor stuff, but Mikey, you have to roll your device. You have to, accept and deny the prompts. We can't control that. Officer of the company, right? That you're not representing, you as MSP, you're not representing as an officer of the company. Don't sign
Mm-hmm.
stuff for your client. That's a huge one. Everybody talks about, on the insurance apps, filling them out. The filling them out part isn't that much of a danger to me.
It's the
Talking,
signing.
yeah, it's the signing. Like, no, please never sign anything for your client, on their behalf. Like at that point, yeah, that's where it gets super messy. So those two pieces are pretty good ones. And then also setting expectations if there's certain things that they need to be doing. Testing backups. Good example. Are you the MSP testing it? Or personally, I can't remember who to give credit for on this, but I say is the client needs to be making requests on testing the backups like that, you get some other good advantages like real time. How does your team respond? If it's a test, as an MSP, you're so busy, you're not going to give it true priority. But then also that, put some liability back on the client that they need to be putting these requests out. They need to be working with you to, test and verify, the backup stuff like that. So just having those solid
But
one-page
Dustin, why
contracts
like
not going to
backups
cut it.
always work? What do you mean?
Having
Backups are
yeah. So
no, it's like backups always work. What do you mean?
yeah, exactly. So having that kind of stuff in there, setting expectations, and then those limitations of liability, just being really black and white on, who does what, or doesn't do it too, right? Spell that out in there. One other piece too, talking
Well,
on that also.
Dustin, what?
Oops.
Oh, good.
I was going to say, don't commit to stuff that you can't really do because, the client is, as long as the client doesn't notice, as long as nothing fails, it's not a problem. But the fact that you, as an MSP, were completely unqualified to be delivering a service, whenever that comes out in court. I had one guy that this was a couple years ago that was delivering SOC services, paid. I was like, that's awesome, John. Like, how are you doing that? I thought you guys had a pretty small team. He's like, yeah, we got 2 SOC analysts. And it's like, what? So what happens whenever they leave at 6? I assume. He's like, yeah. And he's like, but they're on call. They get, and it's like, what happens like if they sleep through it, or like how do the hackers go home at 6? And it was like a kid finding out there was no Santa Claus. You could just kind of see it drain from his face, and he's just like, just stuff like that, where it's like you're not, and that's okay. That's the other thing is like there's not set your ego aside, that sort of thing. It's like you're not qualified to be delivering that. That's fine. There are a lot of partnerships out there and stuff to do it the right way. Because again, as long as the clients don't get breached, nobody's going to catch on to your 8x5 SOC. But the minute that goes to court, that stuff comes out, and that's where you get really in trouble.
Yeah, I can see that playing out in court, like in a bad TV drama. Scary.
Yeah.
Well, Dustin, what do you think we're gonna see next in the MSP space? Like, cybersecurity is only getting worse, I guess is the best way to say it. Um, MSPs seem to be in kind of a pivoting point, like they're not sure what to do. We even talked about that middle bucket of specialization. Like, what do you think is going to happen in the near future?
Yeah, one piece that I can talk about just because it's my weird intersection of MSP and insurance. This is already going. Is you're seeing a lot of hybrid companies that I did a article with. I forget what website it was, but I was joking about it's the worst new acronym is MISSP, Managed Insurance and Security Services Provider. I hope that never catches on. But you're seeing insurance companies buy MSPs. There's a big one. Acrisure has their name on the Pittsburgh Steelers stadium, I believe. And they've bought several, like this is all public out in the open. They bought several MSPs at this point, and their average customer is 50 seats and under. So we all, as MSPs, want to be the trusted advisor, but it's hard to, whenever you're sitting there, your 3 trusted advisors for most business owners are going to be your lawyer, your CPA, and then your insurance agent. Like the MSP, sometimes you get in there, sometimes you don't. Depends on the company, depends on the MSP. But that insurance agent coming in and saying, I can do better cybersecurity than these guys, that's going to increasingly become a problem for MSPs. So that's one thing that we're starting to see, the more formal partnerships, but especially almost called the attack from the insurance side of the things, where they're getting into MSPs. Sort of, you remember like we saw in the last 10 years where the CPAs started buying MSPs, right, and
Yeah.
offering the services, that kind of thing. Maybe it's like that. I feel like that never really hit a mass critical momentum on that. But we are starting to see the insurance companies push into that side of it. So I think that's one almost kind of defensive thing that we're going to have to deal with as MSPs this year.
So would you say, just kind of piggybacking on that, would you say it's wise to try as an MSP to partner with CPAs or insurance companies, or try to do that in house, like be specialized, kind of like you are, but you have 2 separate companies. So
Yeah.
how
No,
do you win in
definitely.
that scenario?
Yeah, because I mean, insurance. The problem is all the licensing and stuff. It's a if anybody wants to talk about it, I'm happy to. I've done it twice now, so I kind of got it embedded in my brain. But partnering, yeah, absolutely. The bigger piece, though, as I say, is make sure at least you're having those conversations, right, to where it's cross the client. Because what you want to have happen whenever that insurance agent starts talking about that Mikey's sitting there, he goes, "Oh yeah, Dustin told me about this. Like, let me get him on the phone, or we'll set up a meeting with the 3 of us." That you kind of prime them that conversation is going to happen already. So just getting ahead of it, that'll get you 90% of the way there. And speaking as an MSP owner, I can tell you that we've done that in ours. That's absolutely worked out. There's been a couple of cases where we got pulled in. It was obvious somebody was trying to wedge us out using that, but we'd had that conversation with the client. So partnership is ideal, but at a minimum, just be talking to your clients about that. So when it happens, that they're like, oh yeah, I need to call Mikey, I need to call Dustin to talk about this.
Yeah, good advice. Well, Dustin, where can people find you on the interwebs?
LinkedIn is going to be, I actually don't post much, but I scroll incessantly and I direct message with people. So Dustin Bolander. And then the insurance company website, Beltex, Beltex, INS, like insurance.com.
Very cool. Well, Dustin, thanks for joining me today. That was a blast. I don't think I've ever had so much fun talking about insurance. And now I get to go argue with my sister for much longer. Thank
There
you.
you go. Have fun.